Hello and welcome to Rajya Sabha Television. You're watching The Big Picture with me, Frank Rausen Pereira. Last month, the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights warned the world that the COVID-19 pandemic would lead to a major increase in human trafficking. India's Home Ministry responded by issuing an advisory to its state governments earlier this month with clear instructions to set up or improve local anti-trafficking networks. The ministry has written to states and union territories to expedite the setting up of new anti-human trafficking units and upgrade the infrastructure of existing ones to combat and prevent human trafficking. The AHTUs are an integrated task force to prevent and combat the menace of human trafficking. Trained representatives from the Police Department of Women and Child Development, other relevant departments and renowned non-government organizations are part of the unit, which was first established in 2007. In the big picture on World Day Against Trafficking in Persons, we will analyze how to tackle human trafficking in the country. Joining me on the program today are Lalita Kumaramangalam, former chairperson, National Commission for Women, Dr. Vikram Singh, former Director General of Police, Uttar Pradesh, and Matthew Joji, Head Development International Justice Mission. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on this edition of The Big Picture. Ms. Kumaramangalam, I'd like to begin the program with you. Let's first try and understand the scale and the magnitude of the problem called human trafficking.
Okay, just let me give you a few figures then to sort of bring home the magnitude and the scale. The ILO, and we are talking here only about labor because ILO is the International Labour Organization, says that in 2019 there were 21 million people trapped in what they call modern slavery. Of this, 14.2 million, which is about 68%, were used as labor, underpaid, free, whatever, but forced labor. 22%, which is 4.5 million, were used in were used for sex trafficking, sex trade, for organ donation, etc. And the remaining, which is about 10%, about 2.2 million, were used in places where the state was imposing enforced labor. The state meaning there are countries in the world where actually the government uses the poorest of the poor, the most discriminated against, the most marginalized communities, both children and women. Now, we are looking here a total of, I think 21 million is actually, according to me, on the lower side. We have a lot of trafficking, at least twice this amount. I would say 50 million or so, which goes on under the table, which there are no real records for, and there are seasonal variations. For example, in countries where you have floods, whenever you have a natural disaster, you will find that from those areas, again, it is normally the poorest of the poor who, for accessing just ordinary, everyday, even food or clothes, they sell organs, they sell themselves. It could be temporary. A lot of trafficking today is not, I don't know how to say it, full-time is, sort of wrong word to use, but it's situationally based. So I would say we have about 50 to 70 million people being trafficked every year around the world. And again, I don't think I'm exaggerating. I tend to, underquote, because otherwise people think that one exaggerates and, it just can't be that much, that sort of thing. Out of India itself, or just, India is used also as a route. It's not just Indians who are trafficked out of this country. You have people from Myanmar, you have people from Nepal, you have people from, of course, Bangladesh, often from Pakistan, all around, and Afghanistan, who are sent out through the main ports. I'm told Pune is one of the biggest, again, export market is such a wrong word to use, but one of the main routes from where people and children, by people I don't mean just adults, I mean even young children, who are sent out. And today trafficking is not just about sex trafficking. In fact, sex trafficking, the percentage of people who are being trafficked only for sex or sex work has dropped. Today, it's an enormous amount of it is for organ donation. With the increasing disparities in income and socioeconomic status throughout the world, and the increase of income in Europe and the Western world, what we call the Western world, which is United States, Canada, Australia, etc., a huge amount of organ trafficking is going on. I have heard of children being used in factories where they work underground, literally, where they do the dirtiest and the most unsafe of the jobs. The most hazardous jobs are being given to children who are being trafficked from poor communities all over the world. And I must emphasize that this is not just in the so-called poorer or marginalized countries. This happens also sometimes in the most prosperous of countries where you have communities that are not perhaps on par with the middle class or above.
Absolutely. This is where I'd like to bring in Dr. Singh to try and, find out whether we know exactly who is behind this, who usually carries out these crimes, and how organized is the system or the syndicate, and what needs to be done to deal with the problem.
Mr. Pereira, after the lucid and scholarly remarks of Ms. Kumara Mangalam, our job has become very simple. Operating on the laws of economics, of demand and supply, this would be somewhere close third as far as crime is concerned. After drugs, illegal arms, human trafficking would be translated into something around $150 billion per annum. And not a single country is bereft of this tragedy, starting from USA right up to Somalia. Every country is privy and is a part and parcel of this crime and a victim of this crime. Now, coming down to what it is, an organized crime, a well-oiled and a well-connected syndicate operates in human trafficking on international borders within the country, and it's difficult to identify a single segment or age group that is not a victim of human trafficking. Now, the organized crime, you very rightly said, the laws are there. And when the time comes, we'll say it is the Indian Penal Code, it is the ITPA, it is also the Child Labor Act, it is the Bonded Labor Act, it is the Juvenile Justice Act. But I have yet to come across a single case where a crime syndicate has been identified, nailed under the provisions of the MACOCA or the UAPA, or under the provisions of also the UP Gangsters Act, although you see that UP has a border of 1300 kilometers with Nepal. And as Ms. Kumara Mangalam had mentioned, that there is a very active illegal smuggling and transportation of persons, and I would be surprised that no action has been taken under the National Security Act, the MACOCA, and not a single sentence for life in these operations. You go to Varanasi airport, you will find that there are suspicious looking people who have come from Nepal, and there's advanced intelligence, and this is the role of intelligence and the NGOs, how they can intervene and identify the crime syndicates. There are those who dub themselves up as fake NGOs and would like to have access to powers that be, important people, VIPs, then earn legitimacy. Take the case of Muzaffarpur, take the case of shelter homes in Uttar Pradesh. Almost all of them were very well appointed people, people with high political connections, yet what they did is extremely disgraceful, shameful, and it took some time for honest journalists like you who could then get after them, and a case was registered and they were prosecuted. So the problem, the enormity of the problem, the dimension, it is an organized crime that pays for itself, and the scary figures are 20 million to 60 million. That needs to be verified. But also, if the enormity of the problem is such, obviously the dishonest policemen, the dishonest prosecution system, and the dishonest netas have a finger in this dishonest pie.
Right. Okay. Taking the discussion forward now. Thank you, Dr. Singh, for laying it threadbare and talking about who's really involved and how the situation is is evolving and what is really being done as far as human trafficking is concerned. But Matthew Joji, what are the factors or reasons that make a person vulnerable to human trafficking?
Thank you, Frank. It was a delight to hear Honorable Ms. Lalitha Kumara Mangalam and respected Vikram sir. When we talk about the factors, I think it is first of all important to highlight that at the time of COVID-19, the factors have been accentuated.
Yeah.
Poverty, without a doubt, is a key push factor. And if we were to take the current scenario, we can talk about thousands of migrants who have now returned home without jobs being a key factor at a time like this. Possibly women and young girl children who are deserted, who are widows, who are single or uneducated or part of large families are highly prone to this vulnerability. Also, the lack of microcredits, small loans, at small, at the village level or at that level, is a big push factor. On the other hand, a key factor is the impunity of traffickers, which one cannot take your eyes away from, who approach or who reach these poor people as a person with a solution, a person who can give them a better future or a better tomorrow with promises of a better job. Um, Many times in sex trafficking, we see romance, marriage, life. Um, Also the pull factor of advance, people being given advance amounts before they go for their job really serves as a soothing factor to deal with their immediate needs, to especially when you're not able to get micro credits. These are some of the pull and push factors. I will also say that there is a large demand. Uh, we follow the study of someone called Siddharth Kara, who is a Harvard professor. His data indicates from 2016, and he had done a study, and his data indicates that traffickers across the world generated revenues of about 164 billion for all types of crime. 164 billion, and that is much bigger than the GDP of developing countries.
Yes.
The ILO had given a data similarly, as Vikram sir had already mentioned, $150 billion industry. That's the size and scale of the amount of revenues that traffickers make. And so when one is set to gain such large amounts of profit, the value or the respect and the dignity for human life immediately decreases, leading them to commit such crimes without impunity, being one of the key factors why the crime thrives, which is aided by the vulnerability of the poor people.
Right. Okay. Thank you, Matthew, for giving us the ground reality and also taking us through those numbers as far as the scale and magnitude of the problem is concerned. Ms. Kumaramangalam, you too spoke about it, and you told us,
Yeah.
how big the issue is and what are some of the reasons really why this happens and how this happens. But yet, we don't see the kind of coverage that we need to see in mainstream media or much reported about human trafficking. Why is that so?
Frank, you always ask me questions where, given my brutally frank tendency to, blurt the truth out, which people don't want to hear, I think that there are two things which are very disappointing nowadays. I have lived through, long enough to have seen that today media seems to cater, has become in a sense too political. You have to be politically correct on which side, on one side or the other. You are not supposed to understand or empathize with what is considered the opinions or the problems or the anything of people from the other side, whether it's on trafficking or whether it's in politics or whether it's in the field of art or finance or whatever it is. And also I find that most of media today has become more of an agenda setting industry than in actually giving you news. News is supposed to be factual. People are supposed to be allowed to get on with making their own opinions from the news that's given. But today, if you see the media, it's not so much about news as about their opinion about what perhaps has happened or is taking place. Thirdly, I also think that many of us viewers are at fault because we don't want to hear these, the underbelly of life, for example, about it. We don't want to know these unpleasant, dirty, secrets of the world, which make us feel guilty. We all want to hear only, very feel-good stories, as they say. Everything is hunky-dory. Everything always works out. Yes, there are problems, but, they are minor problems. That sort of attitude is, if you try to talk to anybody about anything that's depressing, whether you talk about the exploitation of animals by human beings, I'm not talking about vegetarian, non-vegetarian, that's a different thing. Whether you talk about the dark underbelly of why environmental problems are just not being solved in the world, Or you talk about trafficking, or you talk about the way women and children are treated, especially if they are from so-called marginalized communities or castes or whatever it is. Yeah, nobody wants to talk about that beyond a point. Everybody wants to talk about the nice stories, the colorful stories, the light stories where you feel good. Everybody, 90% of, more than 90% of people whom I work with, who are friends, relatives, will say that, oh, for God's sake, I have enough depressing things in my life. Let's talk about something nice. So nobody actually wants to even hear these stories. What is happening is they'll say, okay, we'll give you 1,000 rupees or 100 rupees or 10,000 rupees or 1 million rupees or whatever it is. I've done my bit. That's it. They don't want to get into the nitty-gritties, the down into the dirt, and actually try to make a change. Look at the sewer, the people who still work in our sewers and die every year. Everybody knows that it's wrong. Nobody agrees that it's something that any human being should be made to do, but it still goes on. Similarly, trafficking. Similarly, sex work, the way, especially the poor girls and women who are in places like Hamatipura, really bonded labor and sexual slaves. Look at the women who are being taken to various, whether it's ISIS or anywhere else. Everybody knows it's going on. Families are participating in it. What I told you about the girls from Hyderabad, it's the families that sell them. The girls who are trafficked to or married off sort of serial marriages to people who come in from the Middle East, their families who are actually trafficking their girls, who are selling their girls. The girls are not kicked out of the house or stolen or kidnapped or anything of that sort. Parents are actually selling their daughters in order for large sums of money to people who come in from the Middle East and use them as sexual slaves, and then say talak, talak, talak and go away. Now I don't know after what's happened, the triple talak bill, if that habit is actually decreased or not, but I really doubt if it's decreased in any great volume. Naam ke vaste, yes, maybe. But you were saying that why is it that this sort of thing is not out in the media? I mean, the three main reasons are that we ourselves as viewers don't want to really know about the dark underbellies or, what goes on in life, the unpleasant things. Mm-hmm. We only want to have hunky-dory stuff and interesting, serials on arranged marriages and stuff like that. Also the media nowadays would rather, I think the TRPs come more from things like politics and, sensational cases, etc. Thirdly, I think that these stories, for some reason, don't resonate with most viewers, regardless of age. And we are not teaching our youngsters that they need to be socially responsible.
Right.
What do we teach them? That you must be a success, you must make a lot of money, you must make a big name for yourself. But not that you need to reach out and have empathy and care for other people in the world around you, not just your family or your friends. So I think we are becoming more irresponsible as human beings as years go by.
Dr. Singh, go ahead. I know you wanted to make a point, and I also have a question for you as well. So, how difficult is it from a law enforcement point of view to, to bust or apprehend these human traffickers, and what are the challenges really?
To the question, I would say, is there a single success story of which about we can boast that this is a success story worthy of emulation anywhere in the country? Has any life sentence been awarded anywhere in the country? You see, this is a crime that operates on the laws of economics, and these gangsters have deep pockets and flush with funds. They have money power and muscle power. Any adverse news that is published anywhere is soon meets its natural end and is buried 20 feet below the ground, because these people have the capacity to buy out the news and the news media and any inconvenient news, especially about this kind of human slavery that is prevalent. This is snuffed out. What to talk of the news media? I am personally privy of the fact that a senior officer of the police in the Varanasi airport said that I am making complaint after complaint and nobody is listening to me. It's only after that I advised him speak to the IB, RAW and speak to MHA. It's only then that the local officers will intervene on a well-organized smuggling of Nepali women and children via Varanasi. So this is the depth of the cancer and the disease. It is not going to be treated symptomatically by Band-Aid. For too long have we applied Band-Aid on terminal cancer. This needs to be addressed, at a different level and at a different manner. And the thing that I was
Absolutely.
about to say, that there are journalists who would not like to. I've seen the helplessness of the local staff. I would tell you a real life story in 30 seconds. In a major city of Uttar Pradesh, I organized a raid with the help of good NGOs like Mr. Matthews, and organized in the red light area. We rounded about 90 women and girls there. We said that if you want to go home, please take the fare, the passage, and some pocket money. Please go home. And you know what the lady said to address me as Pitaji, Pitaji, hum kahan jayenge? We have no place to go. One even committed suicide that I have no place to go. There was no effort on the part of the government to rehabilitate them, and any effort even to send them back home, because that red light area was also some kind of an industry there that had been operating for the last 125 years or even more. And therefore, with the utmost of reluctance, they say, sir, you have tried something that is revolutionary, but there is no way we can help you, sir.
Okay, all right. Matthew Joji, let's talk about another aspect now. You know, working on the ground, what are some of the biggest challenges? What are some of the biggest issues that people face? And are there any regions or states in the country that are far more susceptible to this problem than others?
Thanks, Frank. Before answering your question, if I may make two quick observations from your previous two questions. One on the media, I think one challenging factor is really perception. On the question that you had asked, Vikram sir, I'd like to say from our experience working in different states in India and across the world in different countries, what we have observed is that when the law enforcement really is functional, it can be an unstoppable force to deter human trafficking crimes. And in India, we have seen much progress in the informal sectors, for example, in South India, in red light areas of both Mumbai and Calcutta. A lot of work that has been done through our partners across India. So really, there are a lot more positive stories to say of the impact of the functional public justice system. That includes the police, the courts, the social services, and of course their convergent efforts. In terms of then your question on what are the challenges we are facing, I think the evolving nature of traffickers is a challenge, and I think that's a challenge for those who try to detect crimes. I think the uprise of technology, the covert ways of conducting this crime, the kind of pressure that those coming from the poorer regions have, for the lure for an advance amount, and those are, I think, big challenges. So I think the challenges come that naturally from two domains. One is the challenges that traffickers themselves bring, criminals bring, and the challenges of that the poor face. And I think actually it's in both these spectrums that a lot of challenges arise because of the vulnerabilities and the impunity.
Time now to get quick closing comments from all my guests. I've got about 3 minutes left on the program, so in 1 minute each, the best way forward. Let's talk about solutions. What needs to be done to deal with the problem going forward? Starting first with you, Ms. Kumaramangalam.
Well, I'll take off from where my young friend said, the word convergence. There's very little coordination between the different agencies. Where there is, they have managed to do commendable jobs. I've heard of some stories from Jharkhand and one or two from Assam. But as my senior friend, Mr. Singh said, Vikram Singh ji said that, there are these are not really replicated. They're not taken forward. They're not publicized enough. But convergence, I think, would be one of the most important factors for success in this field. Convergence of the police, of the different departments, of the NGOs, of people like both Mr. Singh and Ms. Matthew Joji, the organizations they work with, the experienced and the younger people, also the families, the populations from where these people are being trafficked and children are being picked up, everything. There has to be a total convergence. And I don't know if actually much information sharing is going on even between states. Given the fact that ours is a federal structure, often there is no real information sharing between the states, and there is no national directory at all on trafficking. There should be something that is developed by, again, in cooperation, all states and the center. I suppose it's the Ministry of Home Affairs that will have to take a stand. There was something that was tried where, but I think unfortunately that has been given, the main responsibility for that, authority for that has been given the MWCD, which is the Women and Child Development Ministry. And I really doubt if the police is going to take orders from somebody in MWCD. Let's be practical. It has to be a very practical solution where convergence and where each sectors or each ministries or each part of the puzzle, their strengths and their weaknesses, are their strengths are maximized, weaknesses are minimized. It has to be very, very well coordinated and convergent, and it also has to be well funded. This is not work that can go on just out of the goodness of people's hearts. There has to be much more finance that is actually set aside to stop trafficking.
Right.
Matthew Joji was talking about the lack of availability of microcredit. You see, that's where the finance ministry comes in. And nobody will even think that the finance ministry is needed to help us stop trafficking. So when I say convergence and when I say maximization, minimization, we're looking at a very broad palette, a very broad spectrum here, which we really haven't sat down and tried to work out. It'll take time, it'll take a lot of effort, but it can be done. So I think that should be the key thing, convergence of all the various departments, ministries, and between states and countries also. That especially if you're talking about countries close around, or both source, as they say for those of us who work in this field, both the source country and where these people are being trafficked. Both have to be involved. So a whole lot of convergence and coordination is the only thing that can really take the effort to stop or at least minimize trafficking forward.
Absolutely. All right. And Dr. Singh, best way forward.
Training, correction of intelligence, and also prioritizing this crime need to be reinforced and done up. Just a single example of the Interpol asking Dr. Gilly McKenzie to train the CBI would not be adequate. Sharing of information would also be important. And last but not the least, internal vigilance of the police department and the enforcement agencies will also have to be taken to a different level. Those who are complicit, those who are aiding and abetting the crime also need to be weeded out of the system. But yes, it requires a lot of work, close coordination, sharing of intelligence, and then going forward. Every acquittal will have to be analyzed as to the reasons of the acquittal, why the witnesses turned hostile, and action taken suitably for damage control.
And Matthew Joji, close the show for us with your quick concluding remark.
Sure. Couple of thoughts in terms of way forward and solutions. I'll start with the word coordination and convergence. In India, convergence and coordination from center, state, and district. And I think that's critical. We should also see what is the international piece in that to curb trafficking coming from other countries or traffickers operating from other countries. Frank, you had mentioned about the advisory from the MHA. I think the MHA has stressed on the functioning of the HTUs, and I think a key word in that is set up and upgrade. Several HTUs has been set up across the country. I think it is high time to upgrade them with capacity, with resource, with budget, and really strengthen them to make them a really specialized unit.
Okay, all right. On that note, then I'll call it a wrap on this edition of The Big Picture. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on the program and putting things into perspective for us. What's coming out of this discussion is that in 2019, 21 million people were trapped in modern slavery. That was the official data. But in reality, the number could well be over 50 million being trafficked every year. Organ donation is one of the biggest reasons why people or persons are trafficked. Sex trafficking has come down considerably in the recent past. Women are trafficked for wombs and eggs. Children are used to work underground. These are some of the underlying problems and reasons for human trafficking. It is not limited to poor countries alone, but also well-off countries see a huge amount of human trafficking where there is a big economic disparity. Also, functional justice delivery system will go a long way in dealing with the problem is what the panelists are suggesting. We need convergence and coordination between different departments to help deal with the problem. Organized crime needs an organized approach. With that, it's a wrap. See you again next time.